Today's guest is Greg Lewis, a powerhouse keyboardist and organist rooted in New York City's vibrant jazz, blues, and funk scenes. A master of the Hammond B3, Greg brings his singular voice to the music of Thelonious Monk on his acclaimed debut organ Monk. With deep influences ranging from Larry Young to Sly Stone and a resume that includes collaborations with Sidney Blackman and Sweet Georgia Brown, Greg is redefining what it means to be an organ monk in the 21st century. And we are live. Greg, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you too. Looking forward to talking some jazz.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, Greg, the first thing I wanted to ask you was because the organ is such a unique instrument and we don't see it as much as other instruments in jazz, what drew you to the organ as your primary instrument? Um, and how has that shaped your approach to just playing the music?
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, how I got drawn into the organ, or I was studying with Gilly Coggins at the New School back in the day, late '80s, early '90s, and so he sent me on a gig to sub for him, and he didn't tell me it was an organ gig. And I was like, oh, so I had problems, turning it on, the draw bar settings. The left hand, I played a little left hand, but not serious. So I kind of fell on my face. So that's what kind of drew me into the organ. It kind of made me say, okay, let me figure this beast of an instrument out. I want to figure it out. And as I did, I got more intrigued and that's what kind of made it happen. But as far as being my primary instrument, I think that wasn't my choice. I think people started calling me because they like, oh, Greg can play organ. He has a left hand. Okay, cool. So I think economics kind of made it that way in the 90s, or cats would just, instead of hiring a bass player and a pianist, you could, get two for one with the organ players or a guy with a keyboard who got a good left hand. So I think that's what kind of made me made it my primary instrument because, of course, I still play piano. I practice on the piano whenever I get a chance. I love the piano. And as far as it being, you know, how did it shape? I can't say that the organ shaped my jazz approach. I think, to be honest with you, more artists like Dorothy Donegan and, Mary Lou Williams and of course Monk and Bud Powell and these great musicians who I used to listen to, those were the ones who really shaped my jazz sound, I guess. Yeah.
Um, who were the first organists that you really started to listen to when you kind of established that this was going to be the direction you're taking in? Who would you say your biggest influences were then and now?
Wow. I remember a friend of mine invited me, Nate, to a Oregon summit, and it was Rhoda Scott. And Rhoda Scott, who else was with Rhoda Scott? Rhoda Scott and wow, there's another female organ player who wore these big heels. I can't remember her name at the moment. But anyway, Rhoda Scott was playing and she blew me away. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I got to go home and practice. And that's when I started digging up all the CDs of, or it wasn't tapes, and getting tapes of Jimmy Smith, Larry Young, uh, of course, the list goes on and on. Jack McDuff, I read even Chester Thompson, Tower of Power. I would check out everyone who played organ after that. But I think like Rhoda Scott really made me say, "Oh wow, I really got to get it together." And she blew me away, with her technique.
No, that's great stuff. As far as there's a lot of younger musicians out there who want to start playing the organ, they're pianists, they want to transition. Because it's not usual that they'll just start just on learning how to play on a Hammond B3. So what advice would you give to the young musicians who are trying to explore the organ, or even those who want to develop their own voice who have already started?
Oh, okay. Wow. Oh, by the way, Gloria Coleman, her name came back to her. I don't know how I forgot her, but she used to have these big hills and playing the bass lines, and it was like, how could she do that? But anyway, she was part of that Oregon summit that I saw. But anyway, as far as the young folks coming up today, I would say. I got a chance to meet Jimmy Smith at the Blue Note 2 later on, while I was already playing. I had organs, I was playing bass lines. And so I got a chance to meet him and talk to him. And I said, "Hey, it's a pleasure to meet you." And he said, "Do you play the bass pedals?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Okay, that's it." That's all he said. That's all I can get out of him. So I always tell cats, I took it as, okay, I got to really make sure my feet are together and really dig in. Of course, the bass pedals is so powerful, that sound. If you play Hammond organ and if you're going to be the organist, with no bass player, I think young cats should really check out bass lines, should study those bass lines and really get your brain you know, to be able to split in half, and basically you are doing two jobs. That bass line has to be strong, and in your right hand that counterpoint has to be really together, and it takes a lot of work. So I would say, yeah, study it and study the church organist. I played in church even before I played organ. So I mean, but then you check out the church organist, check it all out, because sometimes a lot of the jazz guys stay with one sound. A lot of the young guys just stay with one sound and don't know how to get the other sonic uh, uh, sounds that the organ has to offer. It has so many sounds to offer, and just staying in with one setting kind of gets boring. So that's what I would tell them. Just study everybody and really dig into the organ and get one. You have to have one. If you don't have a bass pedal, how are you going to practice on one? So that's what I would say.
What are the challenges of playing the bass lines while actually improvising, you think?
Oh wow, the biggest challenge is coordination. I mean, if you study counterpoint, Bach and all that, it's that. But on to me, on my opinion only, is it's the next level, because now you're improvising. You're not just playing a set pattern that you've practiced. You have to improvise that left hand and improvise that right hand and try and make it work. And I think what happens is what we don't our brain reconnects so that the what is that called? I forget the technical word, but your brain has to you have to work your brain so that you can actually do that. And that only comes with practicing with metronomes and putting, the bass line on and playing a repetitive bass line till it becomes muscle memory type thing. And then once it becomes muscle memory, then, every now and again you can think, like now I can think and see my left hand and see my right hand in my head with my eyes closed now. But I've been doing it for so long. So yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge, is really getting that coordination together.
Well,
Yeah.
those are the challenges. What are the rewards to being in the process of in the moment doing the bass lines and improvising?
Oh wow. The rewards are, I hate to say it like this, but you feel like a god, because you have control over, or you have wow, you get to dictate what everyone's going to do. You're the orchestra. You gonna it's you or no one, basically, because you're playing the chords, you're playing the bass line. So you're gonna dictate how you and the drummer act, and then whoever is soloing, you get to bring them up, bring them down. You have so much you have so much I guess I can't think of a better word at the moment, but so much control over the whole situation that to make some beautiful music, and it's a great feeling when you're in the moment and you're making some beautiful music.
Well, and there's a certain tradition that goes with playing the Hammond B3. There's that sound stylistically that people know and think of,
Yeah.
or several of the dichotomies of the first people who actually started the playing it in a jazz context. That being said, um, approaching that tradition, but also balancing you want to be innovative and you want to have your how do you have your own voice. Like, how do you approach balancing those two things, innovating and also keeping the tradition alive?
Wow. Well, it's my opinion. I feel like you can't really. That's just like I said. My opinion. I feel like you can't. When you're paying homage to honor and tradition, you kind of, you're walking in their footsteps. You learn that Jimmy Smith's bass line or to Scott's, drawbar settings, and you try and comp the way they comp. You try and sound like they do to sound as traditional as possible, and but when it comes to innovative, I feel like to be innovative is to be most like oneself, meaning whatever your experience. Like I grew up in the hip hop era. I'm a hip hop baby from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five and roller skating to roll bounce and all that stuff. That's what I grew up with. I only played jazz because my father had these records playing every Saturday morning, Coltrane, Monk, Bud, and we used to get tired of hearing it, but it sticks in your head. Next thing you know, you're singing melodies. Next thing you know, you're trying to figure them out on the keyboard along with P-Funk, all the other music of your time. So being innovative means you go inward after you learn all the so-called rules. Then you want to see how you can break them and still make it feel good, you know. And I think being innovative, sometimes you have to let go of what is so-called traditional. So
No, this is great stuff. Greg, before we finish up, can you explain to the audience who's listening organ monk, what it means to you, the whole origin? Because when people think of your name, they also think of those. We think of organ monk. So, can you give us sort of a Reader's Digest version on that?
sure. It started, when before I even played the Hammond organ, I was a piano player. I used to play at the clubs like the Angry Squire way back, and I would play all this monk stuff. That's really how I got into the new school. I knew Trinkle Tinkle and certain tunes, but I didn't know a lot of standards. I knew these tunes because they were my father's records, so I would play what I knew. And so I even had a band where we would play all this monk stuff: piano, bass, tenor, and drums. We played at the Angry Squire and a few other places. So, when I started on with Gilly and he sent me on that path and I started trying to figure out the organ, of course I heard, once I heard Larry Young play Monk's Dream, I said, ooh, I like what he did with Elvin Jones. That duet it's just such a great recording, that one song. And it made me say, "Ooh, I should try Trinkle Tinkle. I should try 4 and 1, all these other crazy ones, crisscross, and tunes that I've never heard any organ player play back then. You know, and so it led me down that path. And as I was practicing at a gig at Angry Squire, I'm not at Night of the Cookers in Brooklyn. I had that gig for about 11 years. And I had it from the late 90s into the early 2000s and into the mid 2000s, actually, when they closed up. I would work on all these monk tunes all day long. I would work on all these, sorry about that. I would work on all these monk I would work on all these monk tunes, and I think one of the band members, I can't remember at the time, said to me, "Organ Monk," or just said it, and then I said, "Oh, I like that name," but I never thought about it so much until, I started to think about what does a monk do? A monk spends all his time studying. Sometimes, they have to give up certain things. I don't know all the particulars of being a monk, but I know it's someone who really studies whatever it is they're studying to the utmost degree. And that's what we musicians tend to do. We tend to study like beasts. I mean, sometimes we lose relationships. Sometimes we go through, there's a price to pay when you're so involved with studying or giving your life to something like that. And I feel like, I am a monk of the organ because at certain point when I turned that corner for the organ, I never looked back. And I still studying. I'm still studying always. There's never a time when there's not someone new I want to check out and see if I can steal something from them. So the organ monk thing came from the whole Thelonious Monk, of course. I love Monk's music, so I played all those 14 Monk tunes on my first record and one original. And I'm still playing, recording my latest record, Organ Monk Going Home, is however many Monk tunes in one original. But so I'm almost finished. I'm running out of Monk tunes to play, but I really love his music. I love his approach. I love his sound on it as a pianist, and I like how the organ makes it a whole nother beast and becomes a whole different sound. And the way we can hold on to the notes, and one note on the organ can be 8 drawbars pulled out, it's a whole different dynamic. But like I said, I love them both, whether it's a piano or organ. I love what the organ can do that the piano can't do, and I love the piano can do that the organ can't do. But being called Organ Monk, that's how that came about, and I liked it. I like Organ Monk. It sounds cool,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, let's leave it at that. That's a great way to finish off the conversation. So, Greg, just want to say thank you so much for being here and answering my questions, getting to know you a little bit better, and we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.